Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating and highly specific philosophical framework. You can kind of think of this system as a giant funnel. At the very top, it starts out wide with these massive, abstract theories about the human soul, the nature of growth, and spirituality. But as we move down through the framework, it funnels all of those grand ideas into a surprisingly concrete, incredibly urgent mission to save lives in the real world. It's a wildly unique worldview, and honestly, mapping it out step by step is absolutely the best way to see how all these seemingly totally different concepts connect to one another. To make sense of it all, we're going to follow a pretty straightforward roadmap today. We'll start by looking at the two main paths of personal growth, move into this fascinating idea of a 70% threshold, see how this framework totally redefines traditional worship, and then land on the real-world application, the Hongik Ingan mission, and a massive zero-suicide initiative. Let's get right into it. All right, so first up, let's talk about how we actually grow. To really understand this philosophy, we've got to look at the very foundation of how it divides the builders of society. According to the source material, people who are striving to make an impact operate on one of two parallel tracks, the I-pan and the Sa-pan. The I-pan are your intellectuals, the creators, the deep thinkers. They go out into the world to gather knowledge, and to really hone their craft, they need to find mentors. On the flip side, you have the Sa-pan. These are the doers, the social leaders, the entrepreneurs. They aren't just gathering ideas, they're gathering economic resources, and most importantly, they're gathering people. Because their main goal is to build enterprises and lead, the Sa-pan don't just need mentors, they need strategists. Both of these tracks are totally essential, and both require amassing a huge amount of resources to succeed. But here is where things take a really interesting turn. Let's look at what happens when these two paths hit a very specific mathematical constraint on human potential. The magic number in this framework is 70%. The core idea here is that gathering knowledge, amassing money, or collecting a huge network of people will only ever get you to 70% of your total potential. It literally doesn't matter how hard you grind, how brilliant your mentor is, or how clever your strategist might be. Just gathering tools and building a foundation mathematically caps out right at that 70% mark. And according to the source, this plateau is actually incredibly dangerous. Once you hit that 70% mark, meaning you've successfully gathered your knowledge or built up your business, you absolutely must meet a true master. Why? Well, because you now have all these powerful tools at your disposal, but you don't actually know how to use them to make your life truly shine. If you try to forge ahead without a true master to guide you on how to apply what you've built, the framework states your life will inevitably fall into chaos and ruin. You'll basically be crushed under the weight of everything you've gathered. So, keeping that 70% rule in mind, we're now going to hit a massive paradigm shift. This lecture completely redefines some very familiar spiritual concepts based on that exact threshold. What's super fascinating here is the complete reimagining of the Buddha. In this framework, a Buddha is not someone who handholds beginners. A Buddha doesn't teach a toddler how to walk, right? Instead, a Buddha is defined as the ultimate true master. Someone who steps in exclusively for those who have already put in the grueling work to reach their 70% capacity. The Buddha's entire role is just to illuminate the path for these highly capable folks, showing them how to wisely and effectively use their gathered tools for a much greater societal purpose. Because of this, the modern view presented here completely rejects traditional religious rituals. The old ways of worship, endlessly bowing, blindly relying on a deity to come fix your problems, or offering food and candy to spirits, those are entirely thrown out the window. True reverence is radically different now. The only valid way to worship is to act as an independent, joyful operator who actively uses their talents to make society better. And this logic extends straight into the ancient Korean virtue of hyo, or filial piety. The thinking goes, your ancestors sacrificed their lives so that your generation could gather knowledge and thrive. So offering them physical sacrifices or food on an altar entirely misses the point. Hyo is achieved only when descendants live genuinely joyful lives. In this worldview, personal and societal happiness isn't just a nice to have, it's literally a divine mandate to honor the sacrifices of the past. Honestly, the implication is that if you aren't joyful, you're actively failing your ancestors. Okay, so with those strict definitions of growth and worship locked in, how are these spiritually elevated 70% capacity individuals actually supposed to operate in our modern world? That brings us to the Hongik Ingan mission. The lecture identifies these highly capable modern intellectuals as Hongik Ingan. They're basically viewed as God's workers, the true wheat that's been separated from the chaff.
These are individuals who have absorbed and synthesized the immense culture and knowledge of human history. And because they hold all of this gathered power, their singular cosmic task is to integrate it and use it to broadly benefit all of humanity. They are essentially no longer allowed to just live for themselves.
And there's absolutely no gray area on this rule. The translation from the source is incredibly blunt. If you don't benefit society, joy won't come even 0.1 millimeters. Personal joy is literally locked away by the laws of nature unless your daily actions are directly improving the world around you. If you're feeling miserable, this philosophy dictates that it's simply because you aren't using your capabilities to help other people. Which finally brings us to the bottom of this philosophical funnel. This is where all these abstract spiritual concepts, the 70% threshold, the true meaning of worship, the duty of the Hongik Ingan, they all crash into one highly urgent real-world mission. We have to look at a pretty devastating modern reality. South Korea currently ranks #1 globally in suicide rates. But rather than viewing this purely through, say, a sociological or economic lens, this philosophy sees it as the ultimate, undeniable proof that society's intellectuals and leaders have fundamentally failed. They gathered their 70% capacity, sure, but they failed to meet a true master. They failed to actually benefit society, and as a direct result, their lives and the lives of the people around them fell into despair. To fix this profound failure, the framework demands a sweeping, massive social initiative. Capable, educated adults have to step up and become what they call social parents. They need to unite and take absolute responsibility for the despair in their communities. The goal here isn't just treating the symptoms, it's about treating the root cause societal failures by finally acting as the Hongik Ingan they were meant to be. The core belief is that if they can successfully eradicate suicide in South Korea, the rest of the world will look to them in awe and naturally follow their lead. And get this, it's not some open-ended, we'll get there when we get there kind of goal. The strict deadline given by the source for South Korea to achieve this zero suicide reality is the year 2030. Accomplishing this monumental task by 2030 is the exact moment these individuals will truly prove their worth and be recognized on the global stage as authentic spiritual leaders. If they don't achieve it, well, all that gathered knowledge basically means nothing. So, as we wrap up this explainer on a really uniquely structured framework, I want to leave you with a pretty profound question to chew on. Regardless of your own personal spiritual beliefs, the core challenge here is incredibly powerful. Look at what you've gathered in your own life so far, your knowledge, your resources, your network. How are you using your own 70% capacity to bring joy to yourself and actively benefit the society around you? Think about that for a bit, and we'll see you in the next explainer.